As the boundaries blur between the telecoms and cloud worlds, so we're seeing more and more senior executives make the move from the comms and networking world and moving to take on senior positions with some of the major public cloud platforms. One such is Kevin Shatzkamer. He's well known for his roles previously at Cisco and Dell Technologies. And he was recently appointed as the Digital Transformation Officer for Telecommunications at Google Cloud. So, Kevin, can you tell us about your new role at Google Cloud? What does a transformation officer do?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to, Ray. And I think the term transformation officer, as I'm finding when I updated my profile, is becoming more of a common role across all IT organizations in just about every industry. The way that Google's been adding transformation officers is to bring industry expertise into Google to help our customers and partners through what are very, very large transformation journeys. So as we kind of think about industries that are strategically important and are going through very large transformations, I have counterparts in travel and tourism. I have counterparts in health and life sciences. I have counterparts in the financial services industry. And our role is really to bring credibility that Google Cloud understands the transitions our customers are going through, how complex they are, not just from a technology perspective, but all the other aspects that go into it, all of the operational requirements and aspects that go into it, organizational rehashing that needs to be thought about, processes that need to change, etc. So if we look at the transformation officer role inside of Google, it's really focused on our most strategic customers and partners across three vectors. The first is to bring credibility into the process to demonstrate that we have expertise in this space and to really partner with the CXO communities inside of our largest strategic customers as thought leaders, but also as thought partners in both the technical and operational transformation. The second is to ensure that we bring the best of what we have into the delivery process across our service delivery teams, across transfer of information, growing and sharing our own internal knowledge out to our customers, ensuring that our customers are able to adopt and integrate the skill sets and capabilities needed for these large transformations, and bringing the broader Google to bear in that opportunity. And the third is really bringing together our ecosystem of partners, our ISV partners that play a role in some of the edge use cases and vertical industry use cases, as well as our network function and network equipment provider partners, and ensuring that we are bringing all of the ecosystems that Google has to the table so that our customers are able to integrate broad-based solutions that actually solve business outcomes. I think if we look at the telecom industry, Ray, you'll probably agree that we've been in a perennial transformation for the better part of the last 10 years, right? So around the time when NFV really started to take root, we've really started to focus on that transformation towards this cloud native world that we envision in the next several years. And I think the last time we went through this very large transition in the circuit to packet world, maybe it was a little bit easier because we were able to emulate circuits over a packet network. That's a little more challenging today to be able to emulate physical infrastructure over a virtual environment. However, I think that what's really risen in prominence over the last probably 18 months is conversations on bare metal cloud. Because what bare metal cloud brings is it brings the hardware-based operating model that carriers are very familiar with the cloud-based operating model from a DevOps and CI/CD perspective that really carries them forward from an operational perspective.
So you mentioned cloud native there, and that's obviously, we're talking here as part of the Cloud Native Telco Summit. And there's been a lot of talk recently and talk during this summit as well about the transition or using the experience of the NFV years to help take that journey into cloud native and to help with the methodologies and processes. How do you see that transformation, that move into cloud native for telecoms, and has the NFV experience helped?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start out by saying that I'm one of the people who will be in the camp of saying that NFV has been successful, and maybe I'm in a small camp, but I'll say that not necessarily because I think that the ETSI defined standards have been adopted, or that the vast majority of what we've seen deployed from an NFV perspective looks like what the standards expected it to look like. I think that NFV has been successful because it's changed the conversation. It's changed the conversation between carriers and the telecommunications industry and vendors themselves in terms of what their expectations are and their vendors from a delivery perspective. I think it's changed the conversation inside of vendors, moving away from this conversation of what do we build into this new conversation of how do we build it. And I think it's changed the conversation inside of operators themselves to really think less about the technology aspects of what they're procuring and what they're integrating into their network, and more about the cultural aspects in terms of how do they organize and operate in a way to consume innovation faster. So all of those things put together, I think that NFV has been successful in really changing the dynamics of the conversations that the industry has. And I certainly see it myself in conversations with our top strategic customers and with various counterparts within the industry. I think what I see is signs of maturity, that we no longer necessarily have conversations to understand technology only, but we have conversations about how do we operate that technology at scale as efficiently as possible. And I think it's really changed the nature of the ecosystem conversations we have. Maybe 5 years ago, I think it was very difficult to imagine a world where large hyperscale cloud providers were working very closely with the telecommunications industry. I think there was always this view of maybe us versus them and this concern about this quote unquote over the top world. But I think the reality is if there's recognition that the dynamics of the industry and the ecosystem have changed in ways where it's becoming increasingly important for cloud providers and telecommunications providers to find ways to work together, to bring the best capabilities that they both have from a skill set perspective, from a technology perspective, from an operating model perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, and from an asset perspective, and to put our collective brains together, technologies together, and business models together in ways that really define new experiences for our end customers, enable new opportunities and revenue generating opportunities for both cloud as well as telecom, and really change the dynamics of the way we think about the world today, from being this world of cloud and telco cloud to a future world where it's all just cloud.
Now, Kevin, you were recently named by Informa Tech as one of the most influential voices in 5G for this year. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, certainly it's an honor, right? I think it's recognition that that the work that I've been doing within the industry and the way that I've been framing the problem space for the industry is both being well received as well as developing a following. Right. And, if I flash back maybe about 18 months ago, I was named to Fierce Telecom's top telecom rising stars in their initial list. Fast forward to this honor as well, and being named as one of the most influential voices in 5G. I think first and foremost, it's a testament to the opportunities that have been afforded to me really early on to be able to learn from some of the best and brightest within the industry, either in our customers and learning from our customers, or within the organizations that I worked within. When I look at the list of the from Informa Telecom on the 5G 100, there's a lot of very prominent names there. There's names that I associate with on a very regular basis, either as industry colleagues or as friends. I think this is a small industry, and one that, if you look at most of the names on that list, we've kind of all grown up together. First in the 2G to 3G transition, and then the 3G to 4G. And now just about all of us are in some kind of leadership position to take the next step towards 5G cloud native architectures. And leveraging our shared experiences and shared knowledge, and using each other as sounding boards, using each other to be able to reiterate and ensure that the right messaging is coming out, I think is really important right now, because sometimes we can get lost in the marketing message of what 5G is. And I think everyone on that list tends to do a really good job of cutting through what that marketing message is and getting to the real conversations that need to be had.
So yeah, I think you mentioned there other people, how small the industry is, and it's really important. The relationships between those people are absolutely vital to the way this industry moves on, and that melding of the cloud and telecoms worlds. And obviously all those people and yourself are tracking the key trends across this industry, and there's so many hot areas of development right now. What would be the key trends that you think are absolutely important for everybody in this industry to be on top of right now?
There's a lot of things, I think you'll agree, that are changing in telecom these days. And to me, it feels like there's an acceleration of lots of different dynamics of the architecture and lots of different dynamics in terms of how both technology and business models play out across disaggregation, across disruptions. The acceleration of the industry is something that's keeping all of us on our toes. I'll capture a few thoughts on this. I'm spending a lot of time on edge computing. I very recently just wrote an article on the need to separate our thinking around edge computing and 5G and recognize that they are complementary technologies and not codependent technologies. On the edge computing side, I'm spending a tremendous amount of time thinking about the use cases and industry verticals and demand that will be built around edge and where the use cases are for differentiation and monetization across a number of industries such as retail or healthcare or manufacturing. I spent a lot of time in the World Economic Forum on this with my role there, but also with my counterparts and some of the other transformational organizations inside of Google, as well as with our customers and strategic accounts in the telecom side. Cloud native, it's a very topical conversation at the moment. I know we've mentioned it a few times. I expect it will continue to come up as a buzzword in the industry and probably even more times within our conversation today. But what's interesting about the nature of the conversations is it's less about technology and it's more around the operational and organizational capabilities, processes, and skill sets to be able to absorb cloud native into the telecom organizational structures. I think if I flash back even 6 months ago, there were conversations with customers around how do I buy DevOps or how do I buy CI/CD? And I think today the conversations have really shifted into how do I integrate DevOps processes and CI/CD mindset into the business models and into the business that I have as a telecommunications carrier. And I think that's a very big step forward for the industry. And then finally, I think I'm spending a tremendous amount of time on talking about data, right? Whether it be data from this thinking around closed loop operations, first from automation and then into AI and machine learning modeling around that automation and eventually into autonomy. It's having a conversation around how data can be used to transform the customer experience in the call centers themselves. And it's really looking at how data can be used to deliver new experiences, new monetization models, and open up new opportunities for differentiation for the industry. I think that's a really important piece as well. Now, what's most pertinent to this, I think, is when you look at all three of those, I don't think the industry gives itself enough credit and recognizes that it's really the foundational architecture of 5G that enables these things to happen. We spend a lot of time thinking about the Airlink and thinking about the improvements from a technology perspective, right? We'll talk about lower latency. We'll talk about higher bandwidth. We'll talk about more spectral efficiency. We'll talk about governments opening up new frequency bands. We'll talk about open RAN technologies. But in reality, what at the foundation of the way that we've defined the 5G architecture from its lowest level all the way to its highest is that these layers and the creation of APIs and exposing functions, capabilities, and data sets at all layers of the stack is really what makes these architectures possible. And then it's these architectures that make these new use cases and really allows me and the industry to think about the services and experiences that exist on top of that possible.
Now, innovation obviously is really critical to this sector, and bringing in application developers to play a bigger, greater role to drive that innovation is something that's really needed and that the operators particularly are looking for. What can be done to encourage that to happen? And do the traditional telecom vendors still have a role to play in that, in being innovators as we move into this more telco cloud world?
Yeah, I think, look, ecosystems always continue to grow and thrive based on innovation. I think if first and foremost, ecosystems are built on platforms and platforms are built on APIs. So if we take a step back and say, what are the telco careabouts, right? Maybe there's 4 or 5 things. I'd call out that monetizing 5G as quickly as possible is a very topical conversation with telecom. I would say that tapping into the 5G foundational opportunities and capabilities of the platform itself, things like network slicing to go find new revenue opportunities are top of mind. I think addressing what I would call the hard to reach with 4G market opportunities and leveraging 5G access networks to be able to target new industries is a very pertinent conversation. Then I think, simplifying network operations. All of those are opportunities to really think about the world from an API first based approach. I mentioned architecture earlier. I think previous iterations of 4G, LTE, 3G, 2G, keep on going back in the history of telecom architectures, they really weren't flexible enough to even allow an API first based approach to happen. I think what we tended to see is that the limit and the scope of APIs were very specific integration points into OSS or into BSS or into billing systems or CRM. Fast forward to today, and I think we're in this new world where we're no longer thinking about previous telecom engagements where APIs enable specific use cases, but instead thinking about APIs as platform level capabilities and thinking about 5G itself as a platform. So if we think, again, just stepping back, right, 4G from a monetization perspective relied on very rigid, heavily engineered network services. And those network services expose very specific either operator or vendor specific APIs. So we would talk about and think about things like IMS or RCS or LBS. These were very rigid, inflexible, heavily engineered, deeply integrated systems. And those aren't the types of environments that are very conducive to innovation or the development of ecosystems around them. The monetization of 5G, I think, is substantially different. And I think it's different because the underlying platforms themselves allow for loosely coupled network functions and capabilities to be stitched together. And that stitching together can be used to expose services, and those services get exposed through APIs. So I think as we kind of look forward to the next world, I think without a doubt, the ecosystem is starting to develop. ISVs are starting to flock towards telco APIs, network equipment vendors and OSS vendors and startups within the industry are finding their paths to innovation in new ways. But I do think we're still early. Right? We're early in terms of attracting the developer ecosystem. I think we're early in kind of thinking about how do we bring together the whole of the industry to make the application development experience as simple as possible and as uniform as possible around the world. And then lastly, I think we're really early at starting to transform our thinking in the LTE world of API gateways as a function to expose specific capabilities to really starting to embrace API as a mandate for this industry and no longer a luxury.
Okay, excellent. I mean, yeah, so many areas to consider there in terms of how things could be advanced in this industry. But I'm sure we'll see a lot of development and a lot of movement in all of those areas because things are moving so fast in the telecoms industry these days, as you pointed out there, Kevin. So listen, thanks very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And, and good luck in the new role. And I hope we speak again before too long and get an update on what you're seeing, what you're thinking, and how things are going at Google Cloud. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Ray. It was a great conversation. And thanks for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on TelecomTV.